project. It takes every kind of people to make the world go round.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Clarke. Welcome to Many Voices, Many Visions. This morning we have with us a very special woman who is going to be talking to us firsthand about her trip to Iraq recently, and also give us a firsthand account of what it's like to lose a brother to a terrorist attack. Please meet my guest, Colleen Kelly. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you, Charlotte.
I know you've got a whirlwind visit here in Rochester, speaking lots of places, and I'm so glad you would take time to talk to us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Let's see, I think we need to start probably at the beginning. For you, as co-founder of Peaceful Tomorrows, and we're going to find out what that is, it all started on 9/11.
Yeah, on September 11th. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I work in New York City in the Bronx, in the North Bronx. And I was on the phone with another nurse that morning, and she was the one who originally told me that a plane had struck the World Trade Center. And for all of us, that morning was very, very confusing. It was unclear what was happening. It was very early on, so we didn't even have word that the second tower had been hit. And I actually had no idea that my brother was there. He did not work there. He, in fact, worked at 59th Street and Park Avenue, which was several miles away. And I remember getting off the phone and feeling incredibly sad, knowing that this great tragedy was unfolding, and also feeling, as a nurse, what could I do? But I was far away, and it wasn't clear, but just really trying to be mindful of the people there, never dreaming that one of those people was in fact my brother.
When did your family find out that fact?
Well, my mother found out first because my brother's job called her, but it was very, very difficult to call in and out of New York City that day. The phone lines were jammed. Sometimes you could get through, and it wasn't until about 11:15 that my sister Mimi, who lives in Connecticut, was able to get through and tell me this horrific news.
Were you still at work at that time?
Yes, I was, yeah. At that point, I remember we were very concerned that the school that I worked in had over 4,000 students, many of whom had relatives and loved ones who worked at the trade centers. And we were trying to gather together to begin talking about a plan, how we were going to deal with those students, how would the school respond, that it was a very confusing, tragic day. So I was more concerned about being the nurse for the school, and never dreaming in a million years that Bill was there until I heard from my sister.
And once you did that, was there still hope on the part of your family that
yes.
you somehow survived?
Yeah, I think if you can think back to those days, every family wanted to believe that somehow that their loved one made it out in some unusual circumstances. They went for a cup of coffee and somehow escaped, and my family was certainly no exception. We really wanted to believe that. And I went down to New York City that night around midnight. My mother had called me repeatedly and asked me to begin looking for my brother in hospitals. And I think on a certain level, after visiting 4 or 5 hospitals that night, it became very clear to me that no one had survived, that every emergency room we would go to, there was a lot of emergency personnel ready and waiting, but there was no one to treat, that there were empty stretchers. There was just no one who could have survived that. And although I wasn't quite ready to admit it up front that night, I think deep down inside I knew that Bill had also died.
How did your family deal with this? I think all of America was shocked. It's hard enough, it's shocking to lose a loved one in any sort of horrific accident, but all of us found ourselves having to deal with, how did this happen? Why did it happen? Who are these people?
Yeah.
Why would they do this to us, innocent people? How did your family process the way it happened, the loss of him?
I think, again, like most families, everyone did it a little bit differently, and my family runs the whole spectrum of religiousness, I suppose you would say, of political thought. we're like every other family. We have a lot of different opinions about things and very interesting dinner conversations. And I think very early on that we recognized that we would need to be gentle with each other in our grief, because we were going to get it wrong. We were going to sometimes say hurtful things, that not meaning to be hurtful, that we were each going to do this in our own way and on our own timeline. And I think that in the end saved us.
We know that part of the grieving process, one of the steps is anger. And there had to be an incredible amount of anger, but where did you put the anger?
I think everyone does a little bit differently. For me, I was incredibly angry that someone had taken Bill's life in that way, that someone had murdered Bill. And for me, it became focused on, did he suffer a lot? And it became focused on the thoughts and ideas around forgiveness. How could I ever forgive anyone or any group that could do that to innocent people? And to this day, I'm still searching to try to figure that out. But one of the things that also really helped me was meeting other family members who didn't want this to happen to anyone else. We were uncomfortable with how our country was responding to September 11th. And we felt like, as family members who lost a very dear loved one, we didn't want anyone else around the world, whether it was in Afghanistan or the United States or anywhere, to then go through that same sorrowful, painful process.
So what happened next then? You got together with some of these people and actually move forward?
Yeah, well, we began hearing about each other, family members, that through op-ed pieces and radio shows, and then some family members decided to do a walk for healing and peace from the Pentagon to New York City in late November of 2001. I met those family members, and I just remember feeling this huge relief that I could really relate to someone about this. And we met later on that night after speaking at a church and decided that we had to do something. And in fact, we then went on to form an organization called September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. We were formally launched on February 14th of 2002 at the United Nations with a press conference, and our work continues to this day. We launched with about 12 family members, and our group now has close to 90, so we're growing.
All family members who were affected by 9/11.
Yes.
And what is your mission, Colleen?
Well, our mission is really twofold. The first is quite idealistic, but also in many ways quite realistic. We feel like we want to call for a continuing search for nonviolent resolution to conflict. And not that we're going to have the answers today or tomorrow, but that the world really has to start thinking about nonviolent ways to address the very serious threat of terrorism and conflict in our world. The second part of our mission really is about forming a commonality with people around the world who have experienced war and violence and terrorism. And to that extent, we've met family members from the Middle East who have lost loved ones who feel similarly, families from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, families from Kenya, families from the Oklahoma City bombing. Bud Welch is a great friend now and a wonderful guy. And so families from Northern Ireland. So it was very, very comforting to know that there were families kind of with a guiding light, that we weren't alone in this path, and they were in fact showing us the way to go.
Well, it's interesting because you went on and just a couple of months ago joined others in a trip to Iraq.
Yes.
What was the purpose of that? We're going to share pictures a little bit later, but what was the purpose? What was your mission in going there?
Well, it began with this whole theme of commonality, and our group actually had traveled to Afghanistan twice prior to the Iraq trip to meet with the Afghan families who had suffered similar losses in their lives from the bombing campaign. Then it became more and more clear that this same type of situation might happen in Iraq, we as family members felt that we really wanted to go visit and meet other families, very ordinary people like ourselves, with ordinary hopes and dreams and lives, and meet with them and put a human face to Iraq. Because so often when we think of Iraq, the only thing we really hear of or picture is Saddam Hussein. And that's very easy to do because his picture is all over. But there's 24 million other people who live in that country, and we wanted to give them a voice if we could, and come back and share that voice.
Well, I think what we'll do is take a short break, and we'll come back, and you can help share that voice with us.
Great.
Will you do that?
Sure, thanks.
All right, stay with us. When we return, we'll share pictures that Colleen Kelly took on her recent trip to Iraq. Stay with us.